Well, this is John Black, Super Chemist. Hopefully there'll just be one more video after this one and we will be done with global warming.
Correlation is not causation. When we put this carbon dioxide record into the longer term history, and this is the Central England temperature record, which is the longest thermometer-based temperature record on Earth, and we take a look at this, we find that the warming trend we're in started in the late 17th century, the year 1695 to be exact. So we've been warming in fits and starts for more than 300 years. But yet, carbon dioxide increases would only have enough effect dating back over the last 70 or so years. So we had 250 years of warming that was entirely or nearly entirely naturally driven, but yet we're being asked to believe that that natural warming ceased sometime in the mid-20th century. That's unlikely. Those same processes that have been warming and cooling the planet didn't suddenly cease 70 years ago. Looking back to it tells us a lot, looking back the last 10,000 years to the end of the last ice age, this is called our current interglacial period, we find that there were 9 other great warming periods, very similar to what we are today. Those warming periods, we look at the last several thousand years, what we find, there were 3 previous, we're in the 4th great warming since the rise of the first civilizations. We look back 5,000 to 6,000 years, great civilizations rose up. It was called the Bronze Age. And the peak of the Bronze Age, the highest point of the prosperity of the Bronze Age, was the Minoan warm period. The first great empires, the Assyrians, the Babylonians, the Hittites, great civilizations and empires in India and China arose during this period. And then it started cooling. And what we see historically, if we take a look, there's a strong correlation between the rise and fall of temperature and the rise and fall of civilizations. Each of the warming periods, and you're going to hear me say this a lot, it's just opposite of what we're being told. We're being told fear the warming. Oh my God, we can't let it get 1.5 degrees or 2 degrees warmer. Well, if we look back through human history and through geologic time at the temperature, we find that each of these warm periods, warmer than today, experienced great prosperity. Food was bountiful. Food was plentiful. Great harvests. And the Minoan warm period is a great example. It started cooling. And within about 100-year period or so, all of these great civilizations collapsed. And it was probably because of crop failure, famine, and pestilence that set in. Led to the Greek Dark Ages. And then the Roman warm period was the next warming period. Again, great civilizations and empires rose up during this warming period. There's a reason the Romans wore togas. It was really warm. We know it was warmer than today. The Romans were actually growing citrus in the north of England near Hadrian's Wall during this time. And then it started cooling. There are a lot of competing theories as to why the Roman Empire collapsed. But there's a lot of correlation here between the falling temperature, not just with the Roman empires, but empires in India and China also collapsing. Again, you can't feed your subjects, which led to the Dark Ages, horrific time there. And then the most recent other warming period was the medieval warm period. If you think of the medieval warm period, you think of the High Middle Ages, that's this time. And then we got into the horrors of the most recent cooling period, which was the Little Ice Age. An interesting correlation here were the relationship between the witch hunts of the late Middle Ages and temperature. Again, we talked about the medieval warm period. It was a time of prosperity and great harvest. Food was bountiful. Life was good. If he was Emperor Craig in a warm period, he had it pretty good. His subjects were fat and happy. He could feed them. But it started cooling. And in about the 13th century, mid-13th century, it started cooling. Crops started failing. Famine set in. Pestilence, they had diseases spread. And they blamed it on weather causing witches. And in the 15th century, the Pope actually issued a papal bull that stated that yes, there are weather-causing witches, and if you find them, you need to kill them. Well, and the numbers were measured. And again, one of the things I get in here, it angers me. One of the things that I found as I was researching this, it's really an abuse of the scientific process, that some of the scientists that come up with these things have a preordained conclusion and then torture the data and torture the facts to fit their preconceived conditions. That's not how science should work. Science should be, we take a look at the data and then come up to our conclusions based on this. You may have seen there was a UN report released. I'm going to show you two examples, just two, of how you're being told one thing and the facts tell us something else. There's this report in 2019. UN reported that there were 1 million species that could go extinct over the next several decades. Well, what does that mean? If you're going to have 1 million species go extinct over several decades, that means you have to have 25,000 to 30,000 species go extinct per year. So this is the chart. This was, again, in UN, and they've been in...
So if you're looking at stuff that has to do with extinctions, you use the red list, and that's why he went to the red list automatically.
Decline ever since. Take a better look at what happened since 1870, and you see that extinctions have actually been in significant decline. Now, remember I said that it would take 25,000 to 30,000 extinctions per year to get to their 1 million extinction mark. You know what it's been for the last 40 years? Okay, 2. Not 2,000, not 200, 2 species going extinct per year. And they want you to believe, they'll say, it's going to get to 25,000 pretty soon. Just study of its kind, looking globally to the beginning of the 20th century.
Notice how it has carbon dioxide and it has the forest fires for globally.
This is
carbon dioxide goes up, forest fires go down, but they're telling us the opposite.
Global area burned, and again,
if you think about it, all you need is common sense when it comes to this stuff. If global warming was causing fires, that doesn't make any sense, because the warmer it is, the polar caps melt. The warm air can hold more water, so the air is going to be more moist. This is, it's going to rain more. So how can there be droughts and how can there be forest fires more if the global warming is is warming everything up? If it was warming everything up, there'd be more rain because there'd be more water in the air, right? It's crazy. They just say the opposite stuff all the time.
This was by Yang, and he says our results suggest a notable declining rate of area burned globally. Well, why is that? According to this study by the Canadian Fire Service, Flanagan and et al., they stated, we believe that global warming since 1850 may have triggered decreases in fire frequency. That's right, global warming's triggering decreases. It's just opposite. Again, it's counterintuitive. We know, though, that there are 2 reasons that fires may be declining. The other increase here that's stunning.
This I brought up before about how the globe is 40% more green and a lot less brown than it was before we started making CO2.
I call this the greatest untold story of the late 20th and early 21st century, is the CO2 fertilization effect that's greening our planet. This is a study from NASA, and if you don't believe me, just Google NASA and greening, those 2 words, NASA and greening. This study by NASA concluded that up to 50% of the Earth's surface is what they call greening. In other words, vegetation's increasing. Less than 4%, according to NASA, is what they call browning. In other words, loss of vegetation. Well, I'll tell you, that's a pretty good trade-off. I'd take that any day of the week. And what this is doing is it's showing, we're being told The deserts are expanding. Desertification is occurring. Just the opposite of what we're being told is actually occurring. Areas throughout the world, arid areas are greening. Australia, India, probably the greatest place we can see this is the southern Sahara. It's called the Sahel. That's turning into a lush grassland. People are moving back there that haven't lived there in more than 1,000 years. Animals are moving back in. Gazelles, even amphibians, are moving into this former desert area. And we're seeing this around the world. We also see this CO2 increase is fueling not just plant growth, but crop growth. Dr. Craig Idso, who's a member of our CO2 coalition, one of the experts in CO2 and plant life. These are laboratory studies. He looked at what a 300 part per million increase in CO2 would do to these crops. And he looked at 90 of the top crops that are consumed around the world, and he found that it would increase crop growth by 46% increase in biomass. That's a good story. That's a huge, huge untold story that we're not hearing about. We can feed the hungry. With an increasing population, we need more food, and CO2 increase can do it. It is doing it. And there's a reason, too. You might, your marijuana growers in California, I haven't seen any, I know they're doing it in Colorado. They're actually taking the CO2 from breweries and pumping it directly into the marijuana greenhouses to fuel marijuana growth. And we see, too, that, again, this CO2 fertilization effect combined with increasing temperature is leading to record-setting crop growth year after year after year. Well, we're not increasing. We see the temperatures increasing and CO2 increasing, yet droughts are decreasing, and by a lot. Again, just opposite of what we're being told. This is the largest, again, we're being told too, and we hear this a lot. This is stated as a fact that global warming is going to lead to a huge number of deaths. Is that the case?
There's actually 20 more times deaths from cold than heat. So for them to, it's so crazy, and we've actually gone down in deaths from weather.
We're also told that extreme weather is increasing, and it's also going to impact the situation in the United States. But yet we see that when we take a look at this is extreme weather-related deaths in the United States. There's been a significant understatement, a 98% decline in extreme weather-related deaths since the early 20th century. Now, again, a lot of that has to do with better prediction of hurricanes. It's hard to measure hurricanes long-term because some of these hurricanes back in the past, in the pre-satellite era, they could rise up and dissipate and decline. They're certainly not increasing. And we also look, one of the top hurricane experts at NOAA, a fellow by the name of Christopher Landsea. Isn't that a great name if you're a hurricane guy working at NOAA, your last name is Landsea? Almost as good as a geologist named Wrightstone, I would think. But according to Christopher Landsea, he took a look at whether or not hurricane intensity is increasing, and he concluded that additional warming may increase intensity of hurricanes by 1%. Now, okay, let's say he's correct. I don't think if you were in Katrina, you could tell the difference between 180 miles per hour and 182 miles per hour, 183. And I'll leave you with this. We hear about polar bears. A decade or 2 decades, the last 10, 20 years ago, the polar bear was the iconic symbol of global.
And now the polar bear, there's so many of them. They changed the law so people that live up north, in like Alaska and that, and they can kill them now. They're actually told to kill them because I'm running out of time here. Yeah, they're actually told to kill them because there's so many polar bears now. It's ridiculous. They're coming into the town and killing people.